Week 2 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. Last week, with a high-scoring game, it was tough loss for the Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. But Lamar Jackson, he's matchup-proof. He was the first quarterback off the board in many fantasy drafts. And this week in a matchup with the Browns coming to town in the home opener for this Raven team, I think Lamar goes out there, has another big game. Number 2, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. Lamar, he was touchdown for touchdown in that ball game last week on Sunday Night Football. This week a matchup that, believe it or not, haunted Allen over the last few trips he's made to MetLife Stadium, where they've held that offense down for the most part, where Allen, he was still putting up fantasy points, but not at the elite numbers we're used to seeing him put up. So this week at the Jets, we'll see if he can overcome that defense playing him pretty decent over the last couple outings over there in New York for Josh Allen. But like I said, after what we saw last week, it doesn't matter. This guy just goes out there, puts points on the board, and spreads that football out. Number 3, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow, last week, it was a down week for him. And another player where the Cleveland Browns, for whatever reason, have Joe Burrow's number, where against the rest of the league, it doesn't matter what defense he's playing. He's going to go out there and put up points. So this week, a home opener for the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week, they did pull out the victory, but like I said, Burrow didn't do much. Jamar Chase had a down game, and T. Higgins a down game as well. But versus Jacksonville secondary, that doesn't have a lot of good players back there. I think Burrow and Chase connect on a few big ones in this game. Number 4, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts, last week, it was a solid game for him in the victory in the opener versus the Dallas Cowboys. And this week's Super Bowl rematch at the Kansas City Chiefs. And Jalen Hurts, he's just cool, calm, and collective in the pocket. He goes out there and make plays. And even with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith not doing anything last week for this Philadelphia Eagle team, he still had a solid game, over 20 fantasy points, because obviously the rushing ability and the rushing touchdowns definitely boost him up weekly. Number 5, Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. I've said this in other videos, these top 5 quarterbacks all year long are going to be in the top 5 in the rankings, just switched up a little bit depending matchups. So this week a tougher matchup for Daniels at the Green Bay Packers. Last week it was an easy one versus the New York Giants in the season opener for the Washington Commanders. But we know Thursday night games are usually high scoring, and we'll see what happens this week. But like I said, Daniels with his rushing ability, and now him and Deebo Samuel getting things going in week 1. He's a great option weekly. Number 6, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes, he had a nice game in Brazil last week. He ran the football a little bit more, looks a little bit quicker as well in the pocket is Patrick Mahomes. Well, we don't know if Xavier Worthy's going to play. We know Rashee Rice still suspended for more games for this Kansas City Chiefs team. And Travis Kelce might be the number 1 target going into this game, even though Hollywood Brown had a good week 1 game with 10 catches, 99 yards. So this week versus Philadelphia, they know they got to put points on the board. Philly, a high-powered offense, embarrassed them as well last season in the Super Bowl with the blowout loss versus this Kansas City Chiefs team. So I think Mahomes, in this one, the juices are going to be flowing. And obviously he wants to get a little bit revenge, even though winning a regular season game compared to a Super Bowl is totally 2 different things. Number 7, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. Herbert, last week, this team was very aggressive, throwing the football all over the field. And obviously he's got great options in that offense. Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnston even stepped up and had a big ball game for this Charger team. And Amari and Hampton in the backfield could get things done as well. So this week, Monday Night Football, good matchup at the Vegas Raiders. Not much of a defense that's going to go out there and stop opposing offenses. And I think Justin Herbert goes out there once again, has a solid game. Number 8, Justin Fields of the New York Jets. Justin Fields last week, a lot of people questioning if he could stay in the pocket, throw the football, make plays, besides looking to run and obviously being erratic in the pocket. But Fields played a great game versus one of the best defenses in the league last week in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this week, another tough matchup with Buffalo coming to town. But like I said, Justin Fields, when you just let him go out there and play his game, he's going to be good more times than not. And his accuracy's definitely improved as well over the last couple seasons. And he's got a true number 1 wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, which helps. And they know they got to put points on the board if they want to pull off the upset versus the Bills this week. Number 9, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Baker Mayfield, old school type of quarterback, throws it all over the yard. He's going to take his chances. And now with Emeka Egbuka obviously emerging with 2 touchdowns in his first career game last week. And obviously to go with Mike Evans and Bucky Irvin out of the backfield. This is a dynamic offense. I know this week a little bit of a tough matchup at the Houston Texans, where their defense is a good defense, no doubt about it, holding a good Ram offense down to 14 points last week. But Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, is matchup proof. And like I said, with all those options in his offense, he's a solid top 10 option weekly. Number 10, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Last week, it was an easy game for Murray and the Cardinals going into New Orleans. They played well. They won that one. And Kyler Murray, he's got great options as well on his offense. Marvin Harrison, he had over 80 yards and a touchdown last week. Trey McBride, a quiet game for him. Still 5 catches, 57 yards in that one. And James Conner had a receiving touchdown. So this week, another good matchup. Home opener for this Arizona Cardinal team with the Panthers coming to town. And we know this Panther defense can't stop anyone. So I think this week he goes out there, has another good game. Number 11, Jordan Love for the Green Bay Packers. So Jordan Love, it was a good week one for him and the Packers, beating division rival, the Detroit Lions. And this week here, decent matchup versus the Commanders. Well, I think this could be actually a high-scoring game on Thursday Night Football. So maybe I'm a little bit higher than consensus on Jordan Love this week. But like I said, he spreads that football out. Last week he looked good and he didn't even have to do much and had a solid fantasy day. And this week versus Washington, points will be put on the board. Number 12, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So last week he wasn't a fantasy factor, it was Dak Prescott. But in terms of playing well in a clean game, that's what he did over there at Philadelphia in a tough matchup was Dak Prescott. And CeeDee Lamb dropped a couple passes late in that game where Dallas could have pulled out the upset victory. But this week, a good matchup versus the New York Giants, that their defense can't stop anyone. And Dak Prescott, since he's been in the league in 10 seasons now, he's on the New York Giants with, I think, one loss in that time. So this week with a good matchup. And last week, some encouraging things from Dak. I think he's a decent option. 13, Jared Goff for the Detroit Lions. So last week, it was a total disaster, that game. You just throw that game tape out. You take nothing from it. They couldn't get anything going. Turnovers by Goff, taking big hits. And this week, Chicago coming to town. Home opener for the Detroit Lions. And Goff, we know they're a loaded offense. And his home road splits are totally different. So back home opener, like I said, after a bad loss, and former offensive coordinator, now head coach Ben Johnson of the Chicago Bears. You know, Jared Goff, he's going to want to prove this offense could operate without Johnson at the helm, making the play calls and the decisions. 14, Drake May of the New England Patriots. So this week, a good matchup for Drake May at the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins can't stop anyone. We even saw Daniel Jones go out there and score over 25 fantasy points last week. So Drake May, last week, 287 yards, a touchdown, and interception. He's starting to get some guys emerging in this receiving room. Bote, he had a nice 103-yard game last week. Diggs, he did okay, and Hunter Henry's usually been a top target of his. So with that all together and a bad, banged-up Miami defense, I think May could go out there and have a good game. 15, Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. So Bo Nix, it was a struggle mightily last week. Some bad throws by Bo Nix. I think he was a little too confident on the run with these sidearm throws, and they got picked off versus a mediocre Tennessee defense. So this week, a tougher matchup for Bo Nix. That's why he's down on the list for me at Indianapolis, where we saw Indianapolis, they shut down a Miami Dolphin offense. I know their offensive line isn't good in Miami, but they still got the playmakers, Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, Tua, a solid thrower of the football. So it could be another long day for Nix this week after coming off a 3-turnover game last week. 16, J.J. McCarthy of the Minnesota Vikings. So McCarthy, it was a tale of two halves for him last week. First half looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and then second half, he led his team back to victory, including a big touchdown run, breaking a couple tackles and trucking into the end zone. So McCarthy, a lot of talent around him, obviously. Justin Jefferson, got T.J. Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason in the backfield. And this week, a pretty good matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons, where they're middle of the road, defensive best. So this could be a high-scoring game for the most part between these two teams. And McCarthy last week showed he belongs in the NFL and he can make clutch plays. Number 17, Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So last week it was the revenge ball game for Aaron Rodgers, where he took it personal after the Jets cut him loose at the end of last season when new head coach Aaron Glenn in the front office came in, and Rodgers went out there and threw for 4 touchdowns. I don't think we're going to see much of that this season with Aaron Rodgers. He's banged up a little bit as well with a back injury, and at 41 years old, it's going to be tough for him to heal quicker like he used to back in the day. It's going to take longer for those aches and pains to go away. Had a solid offense around him, nothing amazing, but DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin maybe emerging, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth at the tight end position, Jaylen Warren out of the backfield. And this week versus Seattle, I think Rodgers, he could do something like 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. I don't think that's far-fetched for possible weekly numbers with him. Number 18, Matthew Stafford, a Los Angeles Rams. So another veteran in the back end of the list here. And Stafford, when you got 2 wideouts like Puka Nacua and Davante Adams, you got an opportunity each and every week to go out there and have a decent fantasy game. I know last week he didn't do much. It was Kyrie Williams scored a touchdown, and Davis Allen the only receiving touchdown in that game for the Los Angeles Rams. But this week at Tennessee, I think this offense could go out there, be a little bit better. Devontae didn't have a great game. Got a monster game, obviously. 10 catches, 130 yards. But this week at Tennessee, I think the ceiling might be a little bit higher. 19, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I thought last week Lawrence, he would have been a decent start, but after an early touchdown, not much went on the rest of the day for Lawrence. I know maybe the lightning delay had a little bit to do with that, but they got all the options there for Lawrence. There's no more excuses now. Brian Thomas drafted Travis Hunter this offseason. ETN still a solid back, I believe, in the backfield for this team. Brenton Strange, capable tight end. And this week at Cincinnati, they could be chasing points, so maybe Lawrence, I'm lower on him than other people, but I just haven't seen it over the last season with injuries and inconsistent play. And the 20th and final quarterback I'm ranking is Michael Penix Jr. of the Atlanta Falcons. So Michael Penix, last week I thought he showed some grit and he played a decent ball game in a tough loss versus the Tampa Bay Bucks, but this week a tougher matchup at Minnesota. It looks like Drake London's going to play. Darnell Mooney practicing, so that's obviously a good sign as well, where last week Mooney didn't play in that one. And obviously you got one of the best backs in the league in Bijan Robinson, so a good nucleus offense over there for this Atlanta Falcon team. And Michael Penix, if he goes out there and has a good game this week in Minnesota, he's definitely going to keep creeping up the rankings. But this week, I'm going to play it a little safe with Penix and see what he does versus one of the better defenses in the league. So that's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for week 2 of the fantasy football season.